All right. And hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of FinServ Tech Oracles. I'm Johna Johnson. I am here with my oracular colleague, Jerry Murphy, and we are ready to share our thoughts on technology for financial services firms. And for this episode, Jerry, you wanted to talk about, in light of the chaos that has been happening over the past couple of weeks, the regulations that are starting to fall fast and furious, whether AI is ready for prime time for financial services firms. And just to before you jump in, just to give you everybody a little bit of background and the research that we've done together, 29% of financial services firms, almost a third, said regulatory inadequacy was keeping them from implementing AI. 43%, so over 40%, said the lack of intellectual property or data protection is also a roadblock to implementing AI. So, should financial services firms be jumping in to explore it, or should they be holding back?
My opinion is they should be holding back. I think really what's been happening is we're at the edge of the hype cycle where we're just getting on the edge of the trough of disillusionment. And I guarantee you that within the next 12, 18 months, something's going to happen somewhere with some company where they're going to expose customer information. They're going to make some bad decision. They're going to say something that's flat out wrong because of AI, which is then going to cause a financial penalty from regulatory agency, lawsuit from clients, uh, partners, etc. And then all of a sudden, people are going to look, and there's going to be this massive retrenchment and rethinking of how quickly should we value this? Is it really ready for prime time? And the companies who make these AI things have already pretty much said they're not ready for prime time, but that doesn't mean people haven't been using them like they're ready. So I would say huge caution is advised.
Okay, so that places you as a contrarian. Jerry, what a concept, you as a
That's
contrarian.
me.
I know, there you are. Because I know there was an article in the paper, which I admit I didn't read, but it basically was blathering on about how financial services firms are reaping great rewards from AI. And it's true that some of our clients and, especially the larger financial services firms are in fact using AI, typically internally to automate and streamline processes for code development and also to support client advisors. So to give them better information to make the value to increase the value of what they're providing to the customer. So the question I would have is, given that really the genie's out of the bottle, financial firms have been using AI for since pre-chat GPT. For the past several years, they've been doing it. Are you telling them they should stop, or what's the advice for someone who's already well underway using AI?
Well, I'd make 2 points. One is a lot of the previous AI, artificial intelligence, has really been about automation, speeding things up. The big difference with things like ChatGPT is the fact that there's this generative capability where it's instead of sorting through a bunch of things and finding something, it's literally creating things. Um, and the problem with that is if you're an expert in the area, it's great to help you as an assistant. The problem is if you're not an expert in the area, you're not going to know the difference between what might look like a good idea or reminding you about something versus completely making something up that you don't have the expertise to know that it's horse hockey. That's the big problem, I think. And so if to your point, if it's assisting an expert, I think it can be a very useful tool. But if you're relying on it, the reality is it could be generating nonsense. They admit it generates nonsense. And if you don't have the skills to know that that's what you're looking at, there's a massive danger there.
So it sounds like I'm going to unpack a little bit of what you said because, as we all know, AI is a lot bigger than just LLMs and generative AI. So, for areas that aren't generative AI, whatever you were doing within the guardrails, if you're a financial services firm, continue doing with some degree of caution. If you're looking at generative AI, actually, one of my clients mentioned just the other day that they're finding that instead of adversarial networks where you have AI versus AI to hammer out the right solution for something, they're finding greater success with lots of distributed smaller models just ideating, because you can't really rely on the fire hardening that AI gives itself, so to speak. That said, if you're using generative AI and you're trying to come up with ideas, be absolutely certain that you have a subject matter expert in a position to curate those ideas meaningfully. And what I mean by that, we're all familiar with the lawyer that got fired because his case included citations to non-existent cases in non-existent journals.
Right.
The problem is, if you used AI to generate that, it takes more work to go back and look at these cases and determine they never existed than it would have to find them properly the first time. So there's this question of, you have to really balance the effort required for curation and the effort required for, versus the effort required for generation. And if generation is harder than curation, then you should definitely, at least consider it, but don't leave out the curation step. But if it takes more work to curate than to generate, that's probably not a great use case. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I think that's true. And you made an interesting point here, which you haven't heard a lot of people talk about. AI, people recognize it creates what they call hallucinations,
Hallucinates.
right? Where it creates things that don't exist. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, one of the things that's great about creativity is the fact that I create something new that somebody hadn't thought about. And the fact that I can take two unrelated things and throw them together, if I want a new idea, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But it's a difference in the context, right? If I want to come up with create some new ideas looking at a whole bunch of things, that's good. But if I need to, in financial services, I have a financial responsibility and obligation to tell somebody something that's truthful and factual. If the thing I'm using, the engine with which I'm using to make those recommendations is creating things that may not be real, I got to be really careful about that. So I think it's useful. It's a feature, but if you're using it in the wrong context, you could really get yourself in a world of hurt.
Yeah, and I do want to come back to something you said earlier too, which is somebody's going to be the sacrificial lamb here. With yes, we're starting to get regulatory guidelines, but they're so broadly drawn at this point that it's almost 100% certain that somebody's going to hit those guardrails and get zapped. And when that happens, that'll be the case. That'll be the point when you say, "Oh, okay, we've gone too far." That said, and Jerry, I don't think you disagree with me because you've said this before, that we are definitely in the age of AI. AI is where we're all headed. It makes sense to forge ahead with AI with all due caution. It's the caution aspect that I think has been understated. And that's the part where I say you're a bit of a contrarian, because right now it's been a bit of a land grab. And if you're not doing AI and you don't have an AI strategy laid out in front of the CEO, and this is how you're going to take over the entire universe with AI, you're losing. And I
Right.
think
And that's where in financial services, that's where I think it's a responsibility of IT people and risk officers to really push back on management and let them know that at this point in time, the risks may in fact uh, be bigger than
exceed the
the
benefits. Yeah.
benefits.
Yeah.
And that's the balancing act. And of course, financial services firms, given that they have huge financial risk compared to some other areas of business, uh, I think the risks today way outweigh the rewards. And unfortunately, people aren't going to realize that until it's too late. And unfortunately, that's very often what happens with new technology, right? It's like people do a bunch of stuff, and then it gets overblown, and then we retrench. And we haven't done the retrenchment yet. And of course, with all the stuff that's going on with Microsoft and
OpenAI.
OpenAI, the visibility on this is just getting huger and huger. And I think that in the near term, you're going to see a big fall before you see a big win, especially for financial
Which is a
services.
great way to wrap it up. And I'll just remind anyone who's listening, guys, Jerry has spent the last part of his career really helping financial services firms and providing technology for financial services firms. So, this is not just some guy's opinion. This is somebody with long and deep roots into the financial space. And with that, I think that's it until next week. Thank you for watching and listening. Remember, you can register for the entire series online. And please tune in next week at 0900 for the next episode of FinServ Tech Oracles. We are right before the market opens on Tuesdays. Hope to see you there.
Take care.